Hey, welcome back to the Ownr Ops Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Gray. In this episode, I have Alex Forbes back on. Alex is the founder and current owner of Lane 17 Custom Cabinetry. We talk a lot about real life business challenges in this episode. Alex was real and honest in this episode, and he shared a lot of the challenges from growing from 1.2 to 1.65. They're at an inflection point right now, and he talks a lot about breaking through glass ceilings. So what's the next glass ceiling that you have over your head that you need to break through in order to get to the next stage of business? And Alex shares how he thinks about breaking through his own glass ceilings. So stick around for the whole episode, and let's dive into it.
Do you operate heavy equipment and want to grow your business online? Check out Bear Claw Media. Now, for those of you who have been listening, this was formerly Land Service Marketers. We just decided to brand it all under the Bear Claw brand since we've already been building all the social media accounts. So what is Bear Claw Media? We offer digital marketing services for other contractors throughout the U.S. in the heavy equipment industry. So think land clearing, excavation, snow removal, septic install. If you're doing any of those operating heavy equipment and you have a high ticket order value, Bear Claw Media could be right for you. If you want somebody to handle all your social media management, and if you want somebody to bring you more leads to help you grow your business, then Bear Claw Media is the exact service that we've used to grow Bear Claw Land Services. We'll implement the exact same strategy into your business. You'll get a dedicated account manager. All you have to do is upload photos and video from the field of your equipment into a shared iCloud album. Visit gobearclawmedia.com and we can handle it from there.
Alex, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to chat whatever we're gonna talk about today. I'm ready for it.
How was 2024?
It was good, man. It was stressful. It was pretty much our biggest growth year over year. We grew 44% revenue, which broke everything. All the systems that didn't exist, the little systems we did have that they don't work anymore. Like probably the most stressful year in business I've experienced, but they were all the right challenges to encounter to be solving the right problems. So all in all, I'm counting it as a big win. Learned a ton, but excited to start a new year here.
Where did you close at revenue wise?
We ended up at like 163 and 1.63 million. Last year, we did 1.12, maybe just crossed 1.2 with 2 or 3 less people. My biggest takeaway from the year was the people side of business, the internal team, that I was just not equipped to grow 40% with the team I needed. Before, that always happened with equipment, right? It's kind of easy to plug in new equipment. All of a sudden you can produce more because you have the capacity. And this year was a people year, and it was definitely challenging, but I learned a lot in the process. How'd you guys do?
Good. I mean, yeah, we went up revenue wise. I did the same thing, like implemented more people into the business and invested back into people. And so we actually saw a little bit of a decrease in true profit. And I was talking a lot through did you know Les O'Hara?
Maybe. I'm not sure.
He's on X as well. But anyways,
Yeah.
I worked with him this year. He coached me and we were just kind of talking through that. And, he made me explain it. And I'm just like, look, I invested in people this year. And like, if we do the same thing next year, we will, like, the goal is to, like, now that the systems and the people are in place, the goal is that we grow that, right? But I'm curious to hear your perspective on it, because mine was similar. It's like year one, you get the equipment you need, and that's the big thing you're thinking about. Now, this next year, it sounds like a people year. You said it was stressful. Tell me about that.
So I think it's natural to, especially when you have a business that has an equipment component to it, manufacturing or any sort of home, maybe not home service, but like what you guys do. If you're in the field or you're on the shop floor and you have equipment, it's logical to think, if we need to grow, let's plug in more equipment, let's upgrade some stuff, let's get higher throughput machines. And there's nothing wrong with that thinking, but you kind of get excited around the machines and what they can do and the possibility, and you totally ignore the people side of it. And what I mean by that is not just simply having operators to run the equipment. It's like the human element to just business in general, right? I think as entrepreneurs, you get tunnel vision on just revenue systems, like you kind of dehumanize a little bit. And to an extent, that's a skill because you do need to objectively evaluate what path to take, year over year. But I learned that by doing that, I really put aside basic leadership skills, right? I wasn't as personable of a leader or a manager for my guys on the floor, on the shop floor. I hadn't really implemented a great incentive system. I felt my team wasn't getting a good positive feedback loop on all the work that we were doing. It was always and this came kind of like a big gut check moment where like I had an honest kind of heart to heart with everybody a few months ago, and their perception of me was that I just want more, more, and more. And like I never say, hey, I never really rallied the team around the good work that we're doing. And I think that was a flaw in my own tunnel vision of trying to grow the business. And so it was a really good reset. And I, in hindsight, I think the reason why I kind of fell into that funnel was that I've been doing the job of 3 to 5 people for 8 years, right? I'm the guy that does all of our sales. I do the bookkeeping. I do invoicing. I pay all of our vendors. I am the project manager, and our projects last from 12 to 20 weeks, depending on how complex they are. And I realized that I just frankly didn't have the bandwidth to be the leader I needed to be. And what broke the cycle for me, and like every year I call it, and maybe even the last podcast I did with you, I always talk about going or breaking through glass ceilings. And historically, it's been glass ceilings of just equipment, getting some employees for the first time a few years ago, getting a couple more. This year's glass ceiling was separating myself from those 3 to 5 hats I was wearing every day to maybe just get it down to 2 to 3 hats for right now, which relative, it seems like it's a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. But the ultimate goal is to get to where I have a very focused role. And so we hired a project manager that's now transitioning and taking all these projects off my plate. We hired a designer, so I didn't need to try to, half-ass navigate through the design process with our clients because I'm not a designer. And I started that bandwidth shifting or that workload shifting to other people. It was almost like an immediate light bulb where I just like realized that how broken everything was or how disconnected I was from my own team. And so that was a huge wake up call and then reset for me, really just in the last 90 days. We've ended the year so much better and so much stronger as a team to where going into next year, like, I guess you talk numbers, like what's the output change of like being a better leader, getting people engaged, incentivizing people to all work together, kind of row in the same direction. And I really think that we've scheduled out production through May of 2025. We're that busy, but we should be able to do that a little bit sooner than May. But right now with current systems, it's out until May. But booking out until May will be doing double the production volume that we have ever done as like a 10-person team. And everybody's kind of rallied around that now. And I feel really confident going into the next year because for the first time, I feel like the team, I feel like we're all rowing in the same direction. We actually have enough like brains and bodies to do the work now, which we never really did in the past. That all makes sense.
What's the vision you have of the business in 5 years?
Revenue wise, we frankly need to land into a $3 to $5 million revenue pocket. With the overhead and the equipment we have, it doesn't make sense to manufacture like we are under 3 million. So while we did 1.6 this year, and that's 40% year over year, and frankly, every year for the last 8 years has been 30 to 50% growth because I'm pedal to the metal and I'm trying to scale this thing and get it to level out. However, that profit is not following. I mean, profit is very low still. We're single digit profit because we're just reinvesting everything into the business, whether it's equipment, paying our people better, hiring some new key people. Like I'm putting all that stuff before me and my business partner are really taking anything meaningful out of the business because that's what it's going to take to get into like a healthy mid 7-figure revenue. So 5 years, I'd like to be doing 5, and I will assess then if it even makes sense to go past that.
So for you to get there, because you've already made some decisions, like what were some of those decisions that you made in regards to your role and what you need to be doing in the business or where your time is best spent?
Part of this whole kind of realization I had, and this is nothing new, I just think it's my own journey of like learning how to manage and lead people. But the analogy I kind of always follow is like, you want to get the right people on the bus. You want to get the right people in the right seat on the bus. And then as part of defining that, you need to, do you follow John Cypher on X at all? He's just, he's a great gray hair, full of wisdom business guy. And he does coaching. And I've been working with him the last 6 or 7 months for just kind of general business coaching. And he's a big reason of me coming to some of these realizations. But he calls it getting everybody to play at the top of their game. And he has a book. It's called Output Thinking. It's a really good book. And I would encourage you to read it. I think you would get some value from it. Output Thinking so I read that. I hired him as a coach after reading it. And he calls it getting everybody to play at the top of their game. So for me, that's kind of wheeling and dealing. That's sourcing new leads, anything kind of related to sales and marketing. That gives me energy. Like I could do that 24 hours a day and it really wouldn't feel like work. Project management, I hate. I hate. I'm a forward-looking guy. I'm not bad at it. I service our clients really well, but it takes energy from me. Like it feels like homework every time I gotta look, present day or backwards on a project. I want to look forwards on new stuff. And so I recognize that I have to get that off my plate because if it takes me 20 hours a week to do project management, it's probably really taking 30 hours of my brain space because I'm just like processing it and really kind of running through the mud with project management. So getting that off my plate, and I think settling into kind of lead generation, managing our marketing and social media, sourcing new leads. I'm still going to be doing sales as it relates to pricing out jobs because our estimating process is like really nuanced with how custom we get. Over like the 5-year timeline that you mentioned, I would hope that in the next year or two, I could get sales off my plate, or I guess estimating, and just focus into a lead generation role and then managing the areas of the business to where I can make sure we always stay rowing in the same direction.
Where's the balance of eliminating the things that take away energy from you versus identifying an area that you are weak in and allocating time to becoming better in that? And the reason I'm asking this is because this is something I've personally been thinking through. Like, where is that balance? Do you pour gas on your fire, or do you accept the responsibility or the growth that needs to happen to become better in a certain area?
So I think those are maybe mutually exclusive. I think in terms of the first part of that, of doing something that takes energy from you, I think that's going to just be a requirement as you grow a business. I think I'll say this: if you recognize, my journey, I started this business at 24 years old in a one-car garage. So like I'm in real time learning all this stuff as I got to keep up with like a $1 million plus revenue company. I think if somebody that was starting a business in their 30s or 40s, you probably would have realized a lot of the things you're good at or not good at, and probably could have strategized better starting out. So to answer your question though, I think that you first got to recognize what are your strengths and your weaknesses, and not have an ego about it, and just be very honest of what you're good, because that's what moves the top and the bottom line. If you're stuck on I got to be the rainmaker, but you suck at making rain, don't be the sales guy. Don't go get leads. But if you want that on your business card, you're gonna suffocate your business growth because you're not really the guy that should be there. So I think recognizing what you're good and bad at, and then recognizing that, well, I don't have the resources to hire or outsource what I'm bad at, or sorry, what I don't like doing. So I'm going to do it, but here's a strategic plan to where I can almost put a timeline on. I will do project management for 2 years because I think in 2 years we can grow to hire a project manager. And I never did that. I did it kind of aimlessly until you just one day, it's never comfortable to grow. You're never going to walk into the shop or the office one day and say, I'm ready to pay a project manager $100,000. It's just not going to happen. So I think from my experiences, you experience so much pain around not making those moves that you have no choice but to take the leap of faith and hire some key people, or onboard some new equipment, or go for a project that, I don't know if like your first land clearing deal, you have some federal contracts now, right? Some government contracts. If you hadn't there's a point where you never had a government contract, and the word government is probably kind of scary and convoluted, and you don't really know what that contract's supposed to be in there, making sure your contract's tight. And at some point, you just got to say, I got to take a leap of faith and learn from it. And you hope you dot your I's and cross your T's, but that's how you just got to take the leap and go for it. So, going back to your question, I think you have to do things that you don't like doing for a period of time. And I think the more sound of a plan you have around getting out of those roles, the better, versus aimlessly doing it. I think the things that you're weak at, those are things that you can hire coaches for, you can talk to peers about, you can have a mentor. And I think there's just a means of getting better at those things. But similar to having a plan around stuff you don't like doing, I think there should be a threshold where you're like, if by a certain date, I'm not cutting it, I'm not able to get to the level that the business needs, I think you have to just look in the mirror and say, I'm not cut out to do this. We should hire somebody that would be better. And all of those are just you got to be really humble, I think, to run a business and be honest with yourself.
Has there been a stage throughout 2024 where you felt comfortable, or has it just been do you live in a constant state of discomfort?
Yeah, I think the phrase "get comfortable being uncomfortable" is true. And what proves that is a little more recently, since we've hired this project manager, he was actually our installer. He does all of our installations, and he just is a wealth of knowledge. And so he's kind of like phasing out some installs, and he's phasing into our company like part time, and then after the new year he'll be full time. But even just the 1 or 2 days a week, he's been engaging as a project manager for us and taking some of that stuff off my plate. I've been able to do a lot of the back end things I've wanted to do to strengthen our systems and our foundation. And I found that I was feeling comfortable. Like my workload wasn't absolutely insane in a given week, and it felt very foreign. And if that felt uncomfortable to me. Now I felt like I should be doing more because I was so conditioned to putting out fires like crazy. And so the level of it's almost weird to me if there's not some problem to solve that day or that week. And I know that's like you're never not going to have problems in a business, but I think the firefighting that so many smaller business owners are kind of get stuck in, as soon as that starts to extinguish a little bit, it feels very odd. And I'm like just now experiencing it. I'm by no means out of the firefighting phase, but I think to answer your question, I think I'm absolutely in a constant state of discomfort, which now feels totally normal and comfortable. Which is weird, but that's what it is.
I'm glad I'm not the only one. And it's like, I think earlier on in business, it's like, oh man, this is like really uncomfortable. I must not be doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's like, no. I'm starting to come around this mindset of I'm uncomfortable right now because I'm about to break through a glass ceiling.
Right.
And I'll come back to that last interview. So if you guys have not listened to Alex's first interview, he came on. Alex runs Lane 17 Custom Cabinetry. One thing that I took away from that interview, or one of the most important things, was like, there's this glass ceiling that you're at. And it's like business is just consistently breaking through that. And so since then, I have taken that thought process and I've been like, okay, I'm uncomfortable right now. Let's figure out a way to get comfortable with it, because what I've learned is like you're likely just approaching this glass ceiling that you're about to break through. And so
right.
For you this year, sounds like it was people.
Yep, absolutely people. And not just staffing, it's how to motivate people and how to rally people, which is, I think good leaders can do that. And that was a big slap in the face for me, because I consider myself a leader, just kind of my natural state, even with friends, family. Like I consider myself a good leader and someone that can rally people. And I was absolutely failing this last year at doing that. So that was a big realization, big look in the mirror moment. But, everything stays dynamic, right, and is fluid. So if you can't change, you can't evolve, you can't get better. That would be an example of something I needed to get better at. And I think like a coach like John Cipher, I've talked to him a lot about the leadership type things. And a lot of times it's just where to look. It's not that you don't have it within you. It's just where do you look? What's the actual like tactile action you can take? and just go do it, get feedback, fumble around a little bit, adjust, right? It's like solving any other problem. It's just a little bit more complicated because you're dealing with people and human emotions and things like that.
Striker Digital specializes in SEO services specifically for local service businesses. Bodie and Andy, the two co-founders, have helped me get Bear Claw Land Services to the #1 search result on Google inside my state for my specific search term. If you want to learn more, visit strikerdigital.com. That's STRYKER-digital.com.
What do you mean specifically by where to look?
I think maybe an example would be that I don't know if it's like projecting, but like I'm very motivated by like constant pressure, right? The level of discomfort. I'm motivated by numbers and financially, and I realized that, and that's how I was trying to rally and lead a team, was around the same type of kind of metrics I was looking at as the business owner. And actually, our project manager now, when we were kind of talking about him coming on board, one of the things he said, he's like, if you kind of do, if you do a bonus or something like that, like, yeah, people will appreciate the extra, the extra bonus in their paycheck. But I'm like, a lot of your guys, they just need to go down there and be felt like they're being heard, felt like they're being appreciated for their work. Maybe, you tell them that they're doing a great job. Maybe you do more, get a pizza Friday, take them out, grab drinks, let's cut out a little bit, or things like that. Basic little, really just social things of being just like a human being and not being like, hey, great, you hit your numbers today, here's $100. Like, I think people will take the money, but that doesn't make them feel good. And it's about finding the ways to motivate people on just a very basic human emotion level. And you don't need to go above and beyond and be this like crazy cheerleader that comes off as really corny, but it's really just regular organic interactions with people. And I felt, because I was so laser focused on the goal, and I have all the pressure of the business on me, that it was hard for me to disconnect from that to just, hey, let's go grab a beer after work. You guys killed it this week. I never did that. The most basic things. And so I've recognized that now. And that'll be a lot of how I think try to rally the team going into the new year.
Why do you think that's hard for someone like you?
I think it's because, like, going back to what I said, how I started that is I am motivated by, right, if business is a mountain that you're climbing, right? You're trying to, reach the summit. I'm just motivated by I'm at the base. I'm motivated by the mountain. I'm 3 miles from the peak. That's all you need to tell me. I'll go. What motivates me is how to figure out how to get to the top, eat a bunch of along the way, trip over a couple trees, probably fall down a few times. That keeps me engaged and keeps me motivated. Even if like the peak is this financial freedom, time freedom, whatever that is, I'm okay if that takes a decade. The mountain is my motivation. That's almost nobody else's motivation. And when that's like the state of how I see things as thing, here's the challenge, here's how we get through it, let's go get after it. Everybody else is like, oh, no, we're happy to follow you. We're happy to do the work with you to get up the mountain. But, we might want to stop for some coffee. We might want to set up a campfire one night and all kind of tell stories for a little bit and just like enjoy what we're doing, not just like try to sprint up the mountain and fall down 12 times and then keep running up. So I think it was really difficult for me to disassociate like what motivated me and what can motivate a team who's not, because something to be said too, and is that I think the root cause or the reason why there's a disconnect is because the team doesn't have the full picture of the business, or else they would have their own business, right? They don't, like, they have a smaller window of reality of what the business is, and that's based on their role and their job and their department. So it would be unfair for them. Someone who works on the shop floor would have, even if I said, hey, here are our revenue numbers, here's our profit margin that we're trying to target, they would have no idea how to connect that to what they're doing in their area on the shop floor. And that's not because they're stupid or anything. It's just because they don't have visibility on the rest of the business. So I think what I'm learning is I'm still motivated by the mountain and trying to reach the peak, but I'm trying to now break off pieces that are relevant to everybody else on the team. to get them to. So what that boils down to, coming up with like daily output targets that we need to hit as a baseline. We have a CNC that cuts all of our cabinet parts. He needs to run X amount of sheets of plywood per day. Our guy that does doors, he needs to make X amount of doors per day. We need to assemble X amount of cabinets per day. And that's a lot of what John talks about in his output thinking book. But that's just to make it clear on the expectation. That's not to motivate them. This is the expectation of the job. So Lane 17 can operate. It's just simple as that. It's basic math. And then I think I'm going to have a lot of fun figuring out the leadership side of connecting those outputs to getting everybody to kind of rally around them, because it really just comes down to basic human appreciation, kindness, honesty, all the fundamental stuff, right? But you lose sight of it when you're grinding.
And dude, I was laughing over here on camera because it was such a good analogy that you stated. Like, here's the top.
Austin, we're similar, right?
Oh,
you're literally climbing mountains with your business, doing land clearing.
The reason I was laughing is because it shows how messed up in the head guys like you and I are. It's like, why are we motivated by that? Like, all these people have this like real life motivations and like wanting to enjoy the process, and all we want to do is just get to the freaking top. And it doesn't matter if we just have to like plow through trees or trip over trees or jump over a rock. Like, and yes, it's kind of hysterical whenever you think about it. Like, that's the way that we're wired. That's just,
also, and then to add one more element to that is like, you would never be motivated by somebody else's mountain.
No.
Otherwise, you just go get a job, right? You could go there's probably a bunch of, and maybe there's not, but I'm sure there's a bunch of excavating companies and land clearing companies in your area. You probably could have just go work for one of the big guys, but it's like you're not motivated by someone else's mountain. So you literally are like, I'm going to plow my way through to the top. And I don't know what it is about that. I think every entrepreneur especially entrepreneurs that start something, versus, there's nothing wrong with buying a business, but there's some other thing in a business owner's brain that says, I need to start this. This thing didn't exist. Now it exists because I started from zero, and I need that challenge. And I don't know what it is about that, but it is fulfilling when you kind of hit your goals.
Well, I just got off recording with Brock Peel. Did you ever listen to any of his episodes? He started the septic business.
I don't know, but I'll definitely check it out.
Okay, so I interviewed him on 2 last year. We broke it up into 2 separate 1-hour episodes, but dude's crazy in a good way. Like, just specialized in septics, went really, really hard, went all in, said, I'm saying no to everything else. Like 3 guys, 1.3 in the first, they only have a 6 or 7 month working period. And then this year he texted me, got on the podcast, and they ended up doing 2.3 this year with 3 guys. And I'm like, what in the world motivates a guy to just plow through all that stuff, right? And so we kind of got into that on the episode. So if you guys are listening to this, go check out that episode too. But as it relates to what Alex and I are talking about, it's interesting because, there's all this whole like buying the business mentality. And I think you bring up a good point here. And I'm kind of making fun of it, like guys like you and I, but it's like, there has to be some sort of, there's something different there to go start your own thing, because it's not just about like, well, I'm curious to hear, like, is it all about the money for you, or is it about just like the fact that like you have this mountain to climb and it is a challenge to get there, and and you want to accept the challenge?
I think I guess in hindsight, I've almost been doing this for 10 years. But I think back to when I was 24 and I started like, again, 1-car garage. I started making cutting boards. I started the business kind of in the fall, so it led up to the holidays. So, whatever, I sold like $5,000 worth of cutting boards. I also just liked woodworking, which is why I chose woodworking. I was trying to break away from a corporate job, the corporate environment that I didn't like. But like, woodworking is not a fast track to making money. Like, it's one of the worst. I mean, because you're stuck to a passion. It's, in order to make any money, you need to go into full-blown manufacturing. And then when you do get into full-blown manufacturing, you need to get way into the 7 and potentially 8 figures to really make any money. And unless you find yourself in a crazy niche that allows you to go, go ways a little bit differently. But I think for me, it was always just the mountain. I didn't even know that, like, I didn't have the means to do it anyway, but I didn't even know that you could just like go buy a business and go like take over and then start the thing. And implement new systems and stuff. I didn't know any of that when I was 24. So if I was going to get into business, in my mind, it was, I got to start something. And, uh, but I knew that it was not going to be this, like when I was younger, I have way more patience, than I used to have. And even then though, there was something about starting a business that I will commit 10 years to this thing and just see where it goes. I didn't know really anything about business. I didn't know how to lead people. I didn't really know how to really measure the finances and like cash flow and all this stuff. Like I just learned all this stuff over time. And I, I don't know. I think that it's just the mountain itself, because it's, otherwise, why would you? Yeah, anyone could just go get a job. Like if I had gotten a job and applied it 50% of the effort I have over the last decade into like becoming like a high performing guy at a W-2, I mean, I'd be making probably 4x what I'm taking out of the business now, but I would be miserable. I don't even know if I would have lasted 10 years, because I would have just been depressed and I wouldn't have even made it.
Yeah.
And I think that people who buy business, you're just a little bit higher up on the mountain. It's not like there's not a mountain to climb still. You're just you've maybe gone up the trail a mile already, because there's an operating company that's doing some revenue.
Absolutely. So what I want to dive into here is, like, how are you thinking about tying the output thinking metrics to what motivates people in the specific roles?
I haven't gotten that deep into exactly how it'll motivate. What I do know is that we were lacking a clear expectation of everybody. So these output, we also, to be fair to everybody or some of the guys that have been with us for a couple of years, they were also wearing 2 to 3 hats down in the shop. So like we are finally at a place where we're staffed up enough to where people can actually have a focused role and they can achieve the outputs that are needed. Before, like one of our guy that's been with us the longest, Cole, in the shop, he's like incredible woodworker. He's our strongest guy in the shop for sure, in terms of like woodworking skill and just how much he can make in a given day. He was making, other than running the CNC, he was like doing everything after that. He would make our doors, our drawers, he would do finishing, he would do assembly. And it's like, we could never expect him, like right now when we get set up to run cabinet doors, we expect him to make the target is 30 doors per day. He could never do that because he was never even in the door area, for longer than maybe one day at a time. So first off, just getting the team large enough to where you can actually divide and conquer all the things within the business, and communicating the expectation of just a very clear, easy to understand daily output. For us, that's typically some version of like parts per day. So we just know that we're staying on track with our production schedule. This next phase of that, now that we've established that, we'll still likely tie like compensation bonuses to it, just as I think that it's not to say that people don't like money. I think we should still do that, because if people are over achieving on those outputs, there should be some compensation benefit to doing that. But I think there's more of like, hey, if we beat our production schedule, every month we'll go out for pizza. We'll go grab, we all have like a couple favorite bars in the area. We'll go grab, panini and some beers or whatever. Just do more like team bonding type stuff, unless it's all about the work 40 hours a week. And I think, hey, if you guys are killing it, let's just leave 2 hours early at the end of the week, and let's just leave. Like we don't all have to hang out. Let's just go be with your families, go do whatever. Things like that. I don't need like a long list of things to motivate. It could just be a few things that shows appreciation, with the understanding that if we overachieve as a team, we can have some fun. We can take some time off. Like I would love, this time of year is always tough with the holidays, and I would love to just be able to shut down, the couple days before Christmas and say, hey, we'll see you January 2nd, and just give them those couple weeks off, no PTO or anything, stuff like that. I think that stuff goes a long way with people, because you're giving them back their time and their freedom. And, but it all has to be connected to, an output so the business is still in a good spot. If I just aimlessly said, let's just take 2 weeks off, and it killed our schedule, then it's kind of, it's a lose-lose, because then, yeah, they get the time off, but we're in a bad spot. So now they got to come back and work twice as hard during January because we we weren't there for 2 weeks. So that's not a way to do it either.
This episode is brought to you by Dialed In Bookkeeping. Ben and his team provide bookkeeping services, job costing reports, and accurate financial information for the home services industry. If you're looking to keep your books up to date, visit dialedinbookkeeping.com/OWNROPS. When you use this specific landing page, you'll get your first 3 months 50% off.
So we're December 21st, 2024 right now. It's the second time we've had you on, Alex. What are you leaving behind in 2024, and what will you be taking forward for 2025?
Loaded question. I think
I'll
be leaving behind.
Yeah,
Go
let's
ahead.
start with the leaving behind.
Yeah, I'll definitely be leaving behind just the completely raw tunnel vision mentality of trying to grow a business by force. That I will say that gets you to a point. I mean, you have to do that. For me, everything changed. But when we got to 1 million in sales, that was just straight brute force. There were no systems. We were way understaffed. We were just working enough hours to make that happen, making a ton of mistakes along the way, working 3 times as hard because we had to fix the mistakes on top of working twice as hard. And but so that'll get you to a point. So I've carried that. It's funny. You set these goals of like the kind of the magic $1 million in revenue number when you're starting a business, or if you're doing less than 1 million, that's always kind of this threshold that everybody tries to hit. And you might focus on that for, if it takes you years, that's like, it's always in your mind for years. And then all of a sudden it just comes and goes. All of a sudden you hit it. There's no fireworks. There's no celebration. It's just like, boom, one day your books say that you crossed 1 million in sales. And this last year has been me retaining the bad habits of brute force that it took to get to 1 million, even though we had clearly, like, this is the second year we've been over 1 million now, and we're closer to 2 than we are to 1. And yet I'm still thinking in terms like we're trying to break through 1 million. And that's what's led to poor leadership and poor management. So I'll be leaving behind that mentality. And I think it took being able to take a leap of faith and hire some key people to get some things off my plate so I could just see things clearly. What I'll be taking with me will be an attitude of of teamwork and delegation, of really being able to trust, laying out the expectation, whether it's outputs, systems. If I'm trying to delegate something like purchasing, I shouldn't expect somebody to just figure out who our vendors are, what the contacts are, how they're supposed to pay for stuff. Like, I got to make sure there's a system, a standard. I train them on it, and then I trust them to do it. And I check in and I offer support instead of just saying, here, figure it out. That's not, you're setting people up for failure. So I think it'll be, what I'm taking with me is like a more strategic approach to delegating and leading and supporting people, versus just always trying to just like cram more work down everybody's throat, including my own.
Dude, it's such a good word, and an area that I know I need to get better at as well, because it's like you as the founder, or as the guy who's just like pioneering things, it's so easy for you to go figure something out. It's like, that's what you love. You love the fact that there is a mountain that doesn't have a trail up there.
Right.
I love the fact the mountain doesn't have a trail, literally and figuratively, right? Like, we're clearing the trail with the machines, and the same thing business wise. But like, dude, I hired overseas for back office, and it's like such a punch in the face, punch in the gut, because you just figure out how bad you suck at certain things, right? Yep. And like, that's the part about like being comfortable being uncomfortable that we were talking about earlier. Like, I did that exact same thing. I'm like, putting the expectations that I have on myself of like, just go figure it out, putting that on somebody else. I've learned in 2024 that doesn't work in any way, shape, or form.
At all. I had the same exact experience.
How did yours go down?
Well, so I think, so there's this, when you're delegating a role or a series of roles for the first time ever, right? When you like, all right, we'll keep using the mountain and the trailblazing analogy. Like, when you go clear a path, you're just kind of barreling through all the brush and the trees, but in your head, that's now the path, that's the trail now, but you didn't mark any of the trees, right? So the guys behind you trying to follow your trail are just like, did he take a left at this oak tree? I don't know. It looks like he maybe went over here a little bit. Like, how did he get up there? but it's all, because it's just in your head because you did it. And so you realize, so I think the transition becomes, right, this is part of breaking through the glass ceiling, which always leads to a larger workload than you currently already have. So now you either hit like max pain tolerance on not outsourcing something. You're like, this is completely ridiculous. I got to hire somebody for this role. I can't do this anymore. So you do it. You're like, all right, I'm doing the right thing. I've hired people. For you, I'm sure the dynamic of like offshoring a role is totally different than if they were in-house. So another set of unknowns, but you're like, I'm doing the right thing. I'm hiring. I'm kind of doing what I'm supposed to do. And then you realize that person has no tools or resources to do their job. So now they're on payroll. You're expecting something of them. You're paying them. But now you're doing all the stuff that you were doing before with them on payroll. And now you have to create you have to create the playbook for that person while they're trying to muscle through what they're doing while you're still doing all the stuff you were doing before. Like you have to do what the person, your version of you a year from now has to do today on top of the stuff you're doing today. And that's the only way to create the space to get somebody else to fill the role. So then you can become that person for next year or 6 months from now, or whatever it is. That's the part that I think a lot of people just hit a brick wall, and they, depending on the extent of it, I think the delegation part of the business journey, like real delegation, not just like basic staffing, but like you hire a salesperson or you hire whatever roles your offshore people are. I think that process of doing what the version of you next year needs to do on top of the version of you today has to do, I think that's where a lot of businesses fail. Or they strategically scale back to where it was comfortable for them to not have to outsource those things or hire those things. And I think and so that's that is that glass ceiling is 1/2 inch thick, bulletproof glass. I mean, the revenues, you hit 250, then you hit 500, then you hit $1 million. Those are like 1/4 inch plate glass. It's not tempered. It hurts a little bit, but you get through it pretty easily. And then that kind of becomes your new floor, your new baseline. The building a team of people that are in key roles and delegating key functions of the business might as well be 1/2 inch steel for the glass ceiling. And I think it takes a lot for people to get through it.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
That is like the most amount of discomfort I have experienced as someone who's comfortable being uncomfortable. You feel the discomfort of doing that. And so that's where I think, why I reached out to John. I think if you have a coach or a mentor or somebody, that peer group, they're most needed during that time, because you need somebody, or you need people to help you still see things clearly and objectively, because you're also human, right? We also experience regular human emotions. You're frustrated that you can't just do it now, but you can't just keep barreling your way through, because people will leave you, nothing will get done. It's very difficult to navigate, for sure.
It's incredibly difficult. How often do you think about just going back to the stage that was comfortable?
Probably every other day. I thought about this year, 6 like real times, and even in the last 30 days of just like, shut it down. Like, is this even possible? You start losing confidence in your own ability, because so much time has passed of you not, like, glass ceilings, they aren't just like a week long. I think depending on the glass ceiling, it could just be a couple weeks or a month. I think the larger you grow, the thicker the glass is, like I was saying. And like this glass ceiling we're breaking through will be every bit of 12 to 18 months. You have to remain confident in yourself. The sooner that you can standardize, systemize, train people, and delegate, the sooner you create the mental space for you to kind of be able to see things clearly again. But so that's where I was really messing up, is that I was not addressing the right things, and I was not trying to set people up for success with these new roles. I was just expecting them to figure it out, which is totally unfair to them. And that delayed this ceiling breakthrough process by probably 6 to 10 months of me just having to realize that on my own. Again, experiencing max pain. And so when you hit max pain, it's like, I think we're just going to because to answer your question, I can't go back to under $1 million because I have way too much equipment and overhead and shop space. Like I can't, it would cost me 250 grand to move the shop into a smaller shop to stay under $1 million. Like it makes no financial sense. So then the thought moves to, well, I should just close this thing down. This thing isn't working. And then you sleep on it, go on a walk, do what you got to do. I'm lucky enough to have a business partner who handles pretty much, like, he oversees all of engineering and our manufacturing. We have a production manager now, but he's really like the operations guy, and I'm more of like the sales and finance guy. And what's the beauty of that partnership is that we go over financials periodically, but he is so much more disconnected from like day-to-day cash flow and like who owes us money, who, payables, all that stuff. And so he's able to think really clearly about, hey, if we just do, like, I had a call with him last week or 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, this ship is sinking if we don't make some changes over the next 30 to 60 days. And I was feeling like it's inevitable that we're going to sink. And we had like a 2-hour long call. He's like, I hear you, but okay, this is what I think we can do in the shop to get more stuff through more quickly, more efficiently. And in the last 2 weeks, we've acted on some of those things. And, the guys are just literally over 2 weeks now. Now the guys are like a week ahead. The schedule's a week ahead when it used to be a week behind for years. And so it's just a matter of staying grounded and thinking of as objectively as possible, but you got to connect it to outputs that are that human emotion doesn't matter. The outputs have to be achieved because that's how the business survives. And you have to have a total clarity on those things. So that becomes your anchor. I think that's what I've learned, at least.
Dude, it's so, like, what you're talking about is so real. Like, you guys are hearing it from Alex. He's been in the game. Like, he's hit these revenue ceilings or broken through certain ceilings, but this is what's real right now. And I'm right in the middle of the same thing. Like, how often do you wake up with just a pit in your stomach?
Most days.
Yeah. Like, I would say more days than not. That pit is what is driving me out of bed at 3:30, 4:30 in the morning, because I
Right.
like stuff has to be done and decisions have to be made and like things have to be addressed. And I'm just starting to get to this point where like this is just how it is growing a business. And
Right. How many guys do you have now? Guys or gals?
well, we got I'm running a lot of subcontractors on the shoveling side. So yeah, we just added probably 12 more there. So as you know, like, we're at a seasonal business, which adds some challenges here, right? So I basically have to run 2 separate businesses, one in the summer,
Right.
one in the winter time, and they both have their own challenges, right? So one thing we took on was snow plowing this year, and so we're doing that like with some of our guys who are on the summer team. And yeah, it was sort of like a shot in the dark. It's like, look, a lot of people don't do this. Some people do. And like, you talk to some people and they're like, yeah, it's lucrative, right? But there's really only one way to know. And it's to actually just go out there, do it, track your numbers, track everything. And so, yeah, we're right in the middle of it right now.
That, like, just to touch on a comment you just made about some people say it's lucrative, some people say it's not. Like, I've learned that doesn't mean anything. And
You're
I think
exactly
the people that say it's lucrative are the guys that have figured out the outputs in the systems and how to lead and how to manage. The guys that don't are the guys that the owner is for 30 years, he's been grading and plowing, and he never really gave it much effort to try to build a team and systems on how the business is supposed to work. So, and maybe that's a little bit of an ignorant comment, but I think that I feel that it's true because, like, we're in, like, doing custom cabinet manufacturing is difficult, period. When you factor in like the custom stains and paints and the finishing process, that is by no means bulletproof when it goes on a truck or gets installed. Like, it's the most fragile thing in this big, heavy truckload of cabinets. Like, it's almost like oil and water trying to move these things around, let alone the skill it takes to produce the finish that we are able to achieve. And I hold it as top 10% most difficult businesses to operate. And I'm obviously biased, but I think that the people that don't do it, they, the 1-2 man shops that just stay that size, and it's just father son, until the son one day takes it over when father retires. They never try to systemize. They never try to define what are the outputs. Let's connect everything we're doing here to tangible numbers that we can rely on, and then strategize around that. I think the people that say it's not lucrative are the people that never tried to, or at least never successfully did those things. Because every business is lucrative. Otherwise, why would they exist? Just what you can extract from it through efficiencies.
Yes, definitely. And I also like the other side of the coin to that is I do think some businesses are easier to build, and there are better business models than others. And so even within the plowing, for example, it's like there are certain intricate ways that you can go target different subsets of the market and structure your pricing and your contracts accordingly, right? And so that's one thing that we're really thinking about. So like we're totally in startup phase on our winter side of the business, and we're really just throwing things against the wall. One thing we are doing is tracking these numbers diligently, right? Because then we have to make a decision. It's like, well, do we actually want to go through all this headache, this unideal schedule, bringing on our guys, right, and, end up with these metrics at the end of the day? Like, is that worth it to us as a business owner, right? And so like those sort of equations in the beginning, those are things that we're all thinking through right now, just in real time. So what's interesting is you're back on this second time, and I told you this in the beginning whenever you first came on the podcast. It's like, we got to have you on again. And I'm really curious to hear from you and listeners, if you're listening right now, like, how do you like this format of bringing the same guests on consistently, biannually or once a year, to come back on and talk like actual real business and what you're thinking through? Because it's so easy to get on these podcasts and like talk about the highs, right? Like, oh yeah, we did this, we did that. But like to actually have this conversation in public of like, here's what you're thinking about, here's what I'm thinking about. I'm curious from the listener side. So if you're listening on YouTube, place it in the comments below. Yes, I like this format. No, I like the other format. But I'm curious to hear your perspective too, Alex. Like, is that an interesting type of podcast to listen to go deeper on subjects with people like yourself?
I think I'll probably have a biased answer here because I really enjoy like talking shop like this. I could do this for hours. It's almost therapeutic in a sense because there's not a ton of people that you can talk about it with, and at least in my personal life, I think it is beneficial because I think that a lot of people, problems that we're both experiencing, the challenges we're both experiencing, every business experiences it. Every business is just a different season of their journey. And I think most, because everybody only has an hour or something like that, or they're trying to just maybe just do a big blanket of like business culture type stuff. I think every business podcast you hear is the same. You have the same guests kind of floating around telling the same stories. Like, I'd have to listen back to the first episode I did with you, but I didn't even know everything I just described to you. I didn't even know about. I didn't even know how to measure. I didn't know, the whole leadership debacle I just faced this year. Like, those things that were not even on my radar yet because like I hadn't experienced them yet. So like this podcast hopefully sounds like it's there's a bit of growth that I've experienced since the last time I talked to you. So your audience could start to maybe see how, real business owners are kind of letting the rubber meet the road and actually doing something about it, and then having them come back and talk about it. I think there's a lot of benefit to that. And I think that there's a lot of business owners that maybe they're starting out, maybe they've purchased a much smaller business and they haven't had to experience the things we just talked about. And I guess for better or for worse, part of the internet is that this will be out there, forever unless you take it down. So if in 3 years from now, a guy's starting something, hand clearing, cabinet, woodworking, anything in the trades, maybe nothing to do with any of those businesses, they're going to still experience these same issues, these same challenges. They're still going to hit that same checkpoint when they're climbing up the mountain. And so 5 years from now, some good keywords bring this podcast to their attention. Like, I think there's a ton of benefit to that. And So I think it's a good avenue to go with the podcast. And of course, continue bringing on some new people just to keep it fresh. But once or twice a year, just to like see how, check up on people, see how they're doing, see what they learned, what issues did you solve at this revenue phase, so on and so forth. I think that'd be great, because I would have loved that over the last 8 years, right? I think the last 8 years where podcasts like really blew up, you kind of get the Gary V's and the Andy Frisellas and all those guys, and that gets you motivated to dip your toe in the water. And they do talk about some like, tangible stuff you can take away, but it still is all pretty surface level. And I think it's these kind of conversations that now a million people might not find value in this, but if you can find, 5, 10, 20,000 people that are like, I've never heard anything like this on the internet before, this is great. I think that can appeal to a really strong audience that wants to take value from these kind of conversations. I vote yay for it.
If you haven't signed up for the weekly newsletter yet, go to ownerops.com/newsletter. That's OWNROPS.com/newsletter. We summarize all of the learning lessons from the interviews with the guests on the podcast, and we distill those into short, actionable tips, tricks, tactics, and strategies that you can use to grow your own local service business. Sign up for the newsletter at ownerops.com. That's OWNROPS.com. We will definitely keep moving in this direction, because one of the goals I had with this was like, man, I just like getting to know other business owners, because like I learn from you, right? And
Right.
I just had this mindset like, man, if I can just go like host people, ask them questions that I actually have in my business growth journey, right? Like, how are you handling this at this revenue mark? Because the reason I talk about revenue, it's like, I personally believe that at certain revenue marks, you start to have to make different decisions, right? Like, and every business is similar in its own way, that like right now, you didn't even know the challenges that you were going to have going from 1.2 to 1.6, right? But all these things are surfacing because you grew more, right? And these processes are breaking. And so that's why I talk revenue, to give people the context of like where you're at in your growth journey, so that people who are listening can be like, okay, well, I'm at 500. Like, I listened to that guy who just passed 1 million, and that was what he was thinking through at that time.
Yep.
So my question,
it almost gives people a way to like see into the future a little bit.
Yeah. And it's like, dude, if I knew what I needed to be thinking about this next year, going from 1 to 2, or even 1 to 1.5 and 1.5 to 2, right? Like those types of different things, like then I can better strategize for what's up ahead. My question for you though is like, let's go back to the point where you sort of addressed that you dropped the ball on certain things. And it all came back to this, like setting the right expectations with people. And so for me, I dropped the ball on hiring overseas, not because I hired overseas, it's because I didn't set up the right process or the right systems to allow her to succeed. And I'm taking that responsibility. So for you, in regards to hiring and sort of like creating the system and the process for people, what are you using? What sort of tools are you using, or like what sort of process are you doing before you go hire the next person?
I think something that we lacked was the business playbook, which would be like, that could be anywhere from like your attendance or your vacation policy, your PTO policy, all the way how to carry out project management, invoicing a customer, like all of your standards and your SOPs, that all has to live on platform. That has to be accessible to the team that needs to use those things. And, we use Google Drive for everything. So we just have, it's best set up for our projects. When we do like a custom cabinet project, we have to save drawings, we have to save appliance information, right? Google Drive works great for that. Everything that happens supporting manufacturing a set of cabinets, we were also trying to use Google Drive, and then all of a sudden it just turned into this mess of folders and Word documents and Excel files, and just like, initially when it was just me and maybe one other person in the office, that was okay. Like it kind of worked, but I was still primarily the one that had to rely on all that info. The second there was 3, 4, 5 people that needed it, it didn't make sense to have stuff just buried in folders. So the first thing I did was, we use ClickUp in the past. We use Asana, good project management tools. I use Pipedrive for my CRM, a good CRM software. There was no central place to put the company playbook, so to speak. And so I was sick of having everything kind of scattered around. So I chose Notion to dive into Notion. I always thought it was just a really basic kind of task manager thing. And boy, was I wrong. Like, it can do anything. The caveat is you do need to kind of learn how to navigate the program, but it after a month of playing around with it, I've kind of turned that into the company playbook. So now we have a separate workspace for sales, project management, engineering, production, another space for all the other policies and stuff for a place to live. Laying that out there as a central tool that the whole team can look to, I think was, it kind of seems like an excuse because like you should be able to just get away with an Excel file, but it's not conducive to collaboration and a team. So I chose a platform that we could start populating the company playbook on. And then the second I got a little bit of space from offloading project management in this case, I just started going nuts trying to build that thing out. So now our CRM is over there. Our project management, like Kanban board thing is in Notion. Engineering has my partner Jason, who does engineering. He has his schedule in there. Like the production schedule comes out of Notion. Everything's in there. And so then we could start. And now, like the first thing we'll do in the new year is my production manager will start logging the daily outputs down in the shop. So now there's a place to keep score that everybody can see. And now I don't. The part of dropping the ball with, I think, leadership and management was that none of that was established. So my judgment on individual and team performance was always based on my feeling. It was boiled down to an opinion. And if they had an opposition to my opinion, it was just their opinion. And there was no agreement. There was no predefined agreement on what we're supposed to be doing. And so in the heat of the moment of, hey, we're doing good or bad, it's just left to opinions, and people they get defensive, they shut down, you start butting heads. It's not productive. So now it's like, now all I have to do is, check in with our production manager and say, I don't even have to check in with them. I can just look at the daily production log. Hey, this week was great. And the production log, by the way, and this is how I communicated it to the team. It's not because I just like collecting numbers. I have to, it's part of my job, but it's not just my hobby is to crunch numbers all day. It's to see if we didn't hit our outputs. It's to trigger a conversation and look for a solution to a problem to support you guys and ensure you guys can succeed here. So it's not like now there will be a threshold of underperformance if somebody doesn't work out in our company, but it's always to trigger, hey, you didn't do 30 cabinet doors today. What happened, or what can we do to help you and support you? And then, Cole will say, hey, this happened this week. The way that these cut lists are coming down, they don't make sense. Like there's always two sides to every story. So it's about just triggering a conversation to be collaborative about finding the solution. So long story short, creating a place that stuff can very, very simply and clearly be tracked, that doesn't take 40 hours a week for somebody to just enter the numbers. Like it's got to be very straightforward, but also aligned with what your company is supposed to be doing too. If that makes sense.
Yeah, makes complete sense. For those of you who don't know, Notion is a software. It is worth learning. I've used it in the past, and I'm glad you brought this up because this will be a challenge for me to transfer all our stuff from Google Drive into Notion. And I mean, it's fairly straightforward too, right? Like it takes a little bit of playing around with, but like when you log into that, and if you have, I'm sure, like if I were to log into yours, it would be laid out very well. It's like, okay, this is what sales is doing. This is what estimating is doing. And like somebody who's logging into that for the first time, if you create that as the owner and provide that to somebody else, can create a very clear roadmap for wherever you're bringing that person on. And I'm assuming that that's what you've already created, correct?
Yeah. So I've just kind of laid out, I guess, the different departments of the company, and we've populated some key things like CRM, schedule, stuff like that. I'll start like all the nitty gritty SOPs and standards and all that will kind of filter in over time as we create that stuff. But I guess what's intimidating about Notion is that it is, when you create your account and log in for the first time, it's a total blank slate. And so just like any software, you got to put in the hours to just figure out how to navigate the program. Where do I click to make stuff happen? You got to figure that out over the first week or two. But everything in there is basically create lists. You can create tables. it's really basic. Like once I kind of broke through, it's not difficult to populate. You just have to, because it's a blank slate, you're kind of left to your imagination of how you want to lay it out. Then you do stuff that doesn't work, then you change the formatting and whatever. But what's great, like, I guess, what's the role that you've hired overseas for?
Just basic back office admin stuff. It's like, I know one of my biggest strengths is just identifying the opportunities and then going and making those things happen. So like at a high level, I know that that's what I do best. At the weakness side, the other side of the equation, it's like anything that's recurring, I just suck at. Like I get bored so fast. And that was my question earlier, is like, as an entrepreneur, like where do you fight that battle of like, okay, this is an area that I currently suck at. Should I focus time on getting better here? Or do I just figure out a way to delegate this to somebody else? And I naturally, like there's this like egotistical piece of, yeah, I'm going to get better and I'm going to do this, right?
Which is a weakness.
Yeah.
It can be a weakness if you're not actually good at that thing.
Now, going back to your point that you made, I do agree with you in a sense that like sometimes you just got to step up and figure it out as an owner in the early days, especially as a startup, because you're going to wear like 13 different hats at any given time. And until you find the person to delegate that to, like you just got to do it. And you either got to do it and make it happen and do it right, or you're going to suck at it and your business is going to, suffer from that. The motivation early on in a business, it's like that motivation of not wanting to look like you suck at something in front of a customer is enough to motivate me to do it. But once you get to the point to where it's like, okay, this is becoming a weekly recurring task, to me, I will do it. I'll figure out the process. And then like I keep a sheet where I'm just like, so for example, right now, one thing I do on our shoveling crew is I get the lists texted to me from our foreman. I input all those on a sheet right now, on a Google sheet. And I'm like, okay, that happens every single time it snows. Like I need to add that to the list to delegate, right? So then I need to go create that process. And I just know that if I let myself do any task for too long that is recurring every single week, that's when I get overloaded. And that's when I start dropping the ball on those recurring tasks. So I just know at this point in my entrepreneurial journey now that like I have to delegate that while it's still like a high of like I'm pioneering this process. I'm figuring out this process. Okay, like once I get to that point, now it's time to like create the process, create a Loom video on it, put it into something like I've been organizing all of mine in Loom, but I do believe like powering that with Notion could be a super powerful way to create a playbook.
Yeah. So I think you recognizing that I have energy from being in the pioneering phase, recognizing that you need to harness that and do something about it. Like that's the time to standardize that role of when you're still excited about it. I think what happens is that you start feeling the burnout of, okay, I don't actually like this thing. It's recurring. I don't want to do it. Now you're not motivated to do the additional work of standardizing it and systemizing it that stacks on top of the work you're already doing because you're doing that recurring thing. And then you experience max pain in that role. I'm just going to hire somebody with just no playbook for them. What's great about Notion, because you start, there's things like Loom, there's Google Sheets, there's all these things, that different forms of media that it takes to like actually create a standard around something. And I found that was the disconnect for me, of that there was no place to put that. And what's great about Notion is that pretty much everything in Notion is a page. So even if you made a list or you make a table, if you put, I'm just going to make up, if you're overseas employee, just one of her admin roles is maybe to invoice a customer. Well, you might have a table of all the lists or the list of things that she's supposed to do that kind of define her role. And there might just be one page on invoicing. So now you can type up a couple sentences about how to do that. Maybe you include a couple bolded lists of some nuanced things that, you just know about from invoicing customers for years. And then you paste your Loom video under all that. And now you can put a video. So now you can have a page just on invoicing, and you can link a Google Sheet. Like you can do all these things on just one central page about invoicing that right now without something like Notion to do that in, it's just kind of the stuff scattered everywhere. And that's what I think is the power of like the centralization of information, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. Man, you've encouraged me. Like, this is the work. I've known it in the back of my mind, right? But like, this is why I love doing the podcast. And I genuinely hope you guys who are listening to this can like hear it in my voice. This is why I started doing the podcast, because I'm a firm believer that iron sharpens iron. And Alex, he has been in the trenches for the last decade. He is figuring out these systems. And by having these types of conversations, it's like, all right, Alex figured this out. It's encouragement to me to be like, all right, pick it up, Austin. Like, stop dropping the ball. You know that you need to address this. The encouragement from somebody like Alex is the kick in the pants to just go make it happen. So if you're in the same boat and you're listening to this, like, go download Notion. Let's rock and roll. Let's go figure this thing out. Alex, what tips do you have for starting out?
I think, hey, I appreciate you having me on, because I love having these conversations. It's why I started following you originally. It's why I got on X originally, because it's a place to talk about this stuff and get motivated by other people doing it. And I think that being said, I am not some genius, right? I think I'm a pretty sharp guy, but like I'm not some crazy intellect. I'm just a guy who isn't willing to give up. So I think if you're just starting out, or if you're just hitting that next glass ceiling, it's going to hurt. It's going to suck. There's no way around that. There's no way to soften the blow of growth. And the biggest advice is have confidence in yourself, in the team that you're building. Just don't give up. And you'll figure, and you can solve a lot of problems with that mentality.
I love it, man. Well, this has been fun. It always is, Alex. And I always appreciate our engagement back and forth. It's like we've talked about multiple times. Like, I think that's why we both joined X, is because you can meet other people who are wired similarly, they're wired to go trailblaze up the mountain with no path. And look, I'm thankful for our friendship at this point, and don't ever hesitate to reach out if you ever need to just, bounce something off me, and I'll do the same. And I wish you the best in 2025. I genuinely do.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You as well, man. I'm curious to see how the plowing contracts go and how you transition that back into land clearing and some excavating roles once the weather breaks. So I'll keep tabs on you over on X for sure.
So I've got, it's been really fun. The short of it, and I'll leave it at this, is like, I have found the 20% that's driving the 80% of growth there. And so I will leave it at that. Great. And we will wrap up there. Alex, once again, thanks so much for being on another episode of the Ownr Ops Podcast. Listeners, thanks so much for listening. I do appreciate your guys' support. Once again, started this just as a way to make connections and sort of come back to that mindset of like iron sharpens iron. And so I truly believe that, Alex is sharpening my skills just by having this conversation. And I hope you guys are getting some value out of this as well. If you are, we would sure appreciate if you'd leave a 5-star review. Just like building a local service business like Alex and I, getting 5-star reviews on Google is super important for those businesses. Podcasts, getting the 5-star reviews are very similar. So if you like this stuff and you don't mind, leave a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify, and then like and subscribe on this YouTube channel. It really helps us out. We appreciate the support. Finally, we are sending a weekly newsletter where our agency team takes this podcast. We use tools like ChatGPT, summarize things, take some high-level bullet points out of it, and then we send that to you in a weekly email on Saturdays. So if you have not signed up for the newsletter yet, go to ownerops.com/newsletter. That's OWNROPS.com/newsletter. Once again, thanks for listening. Don't forget, work hard, do your best, never settle for less. See you guys in the next one.